coming through?
Loud and clear, 5 by 5.
Loud
Yes,
and
sir.
very good. Glad to see it.
Good to see you.
Glad to see you again. Glad to hear it. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir.
Are you recording already?
I certainly am. Yes, sir.
Okay, well then let's get started. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Angels who are assigned to us in each one of us, including yourself, who are assigned to us in each one of us, including yourself, myself, and all of our listeners. May they be pleased with what transpires during this hour. May they help us and guide us. May the truth be made manifest. May we unveil what must be revealed. May we help each other and our listeners understand what must be understood in order to become better servants of the Most High. Now, my dear brother, we've been working on this coming together of the East and the West, the North and the South, the right and the left, the two wings, the apposition as opposed to the opposition, the male and the female, the consciousness and the unconsciousness, these things called the yin and the yang of our existence as men and women in the earth. And in order to serve our destiny, in order to serve our master of masters, we must understand this thing in a clearer fashion. And that's what I'm concerned about as we approach Nunetics. I say that with a great bit of joy. As we approach Nunetics, it's a new concept, and may Allah reward you for having shared this knowledge with us. What concerns me here about this topic is the joining. I used to go to church at the Rock of Panama City in Florida, in Panama City in Florida. This was a church led by what he called himself the Apostle F. Nolan Ball, and he used that term apostle as a word that represented authority, particularly male authority, because he was concerned about the making of men of God. Okay, nothing wrong with that. I just met another fellow who was a salesman who came to us to try to persuade us a few days ago, and he's working with street boys and men out of prison who up in Louisville, trying to do the same thing, you see. And your dear wife is concerned about making women out of women, you see. We want to take these girl children and men children and raise them up and turn them into men and women who can serve their creator to the best of their ability. And we can't do that if we remain ignorant. So what we're trying to do here is to elements of ignorance so that we can better serve our creator. Now, there is a new physics that's noising itself abroad in the scientific community. It's barely made its way into the street world, if you will. But it's there nevertheless. It hasn't really made its way into education because it's being opposed. Now, this new science has something in common with Nunetics. It begins with the letter N. It's called noetic science. And the noetic sciences are devoted to unveiling and erasing superstition, unveiling the mysteries that we don't comprehend with respect to our physical universe. Physics is incomplete. We know that the equations that were established by Einstein during his generation, this subatomic world is still expanding itself, is still expanding in knowledge, but yet there's something incomplete because as they try to finish and balance their equations, they keep on coming up with a, how shall we say, an anonymous observer. At first, they used to think that it was the observer, the scientist who's doing the observing of whatever the phenomena might be, and it affects the outcome, the odds against or for a certain event happening as they would like to predict it. So their predictions are pretty good, but there's another element there of an anonymous observer, which they're trying to fit into the equation. And the greatest of them are saying, okay, well, it has something to do with this God particle, and this has something to do with waves. And others say, oh, it's got something to do with light. And others say, oh, the wave is disappearing. We don't know what's happened to it. We can't balance Einstein's equation. It's just there's this thing missing, you see. Well, I call this thing in my book on sexology, I call it the hungry ghost. Now, I'm not referring to God Almighty. I'm referring to something because God is not in the universe. God created it. Okay, so let's get that clear and let's not hop off into monism or pantheism or any of those foolish ideas, clever as they might be. Um, what's missing is this hungry ghost. And it's missing in our relationships with each other. And this is how I settle the LGBT problem, the conundrum, because the noetic sciences have allowed us to understand from a subatomic physics perspective what's going on when two people come together and join, you see, each other. Now, this is what Apostle F. Nolan Ball was calling about when he was trying to raise men. He said, well, you're going to be joined to me, or you're going to be joined to somebody else, you're going to be joined to your wife. God's in the business of joining people together, joining things together. And he almost, we almost have the idea of carpentry here. We're going to make a joint, and we know the Amish, they can make these wonderful joints without any nails and screws and all this sort of thing. And that's kind of what we're talking about here when we're coming together in joining each other in holy marriage, because that's what it is. It is holy. And we can reduce it to just a business deal, but it's much more significant than that because it is a sacred thing. So, what's at the basis of this sacrality? Well, you reminded us in our last conversation that, well, there are certain people who, if they try to do this joining, man on man or woman on woman, they can't accomplish it. It doesn't get done. It's, in fact, impossible. Well, in my book on sexology, I explain why, and I want to touch on that right now to see where it is that Nunetics and Al Quran can fit into this particle physics equation, you see, to unveil the anonymous observer, you see, if you will. And I'll just say, okay, well, this anonymous observer has something to do with kun faya kun. It is not God himself, it is not our creator, but it is something that proceeded from him. It is this word that everybody likes to call Jesus, you see. And so let's not confuse the two, but let us just say that the greatest of our physicists who are pursuing noetic sciences, pursuing the noetic sciences in light of expanding our consciousness with our reason, you see. Um, they have decided and they have determined and proven that there are certain things at the subatomic level that must occur in order for joining to take place between different systems. And well, hey, my system is not exactly the same as my wife's system. We have some commonalities, we have some similarities, but we're not the same. Okay. Now, in order for us to join and to make a go of this holy thing we call matrimony, something has to take place. And this thing that takes place is what these noetics physicists call the um, the joining of systems configurations at the subatomic level, so that there are tensor vibrational configurations that allow for this joining to take place at the subatomic level. And in order for this to take place, there has to be a complementarity. In other words, one system has to complement the other system in order for them to join and come together and fulfill their purpose. Okay. It's really as simple as that. Now, I'm sure that we can get into and start talking about the waves and the muons and the electrons and the neons and whatever else are in this subatomic world. We're just giving those names, those things that they see on the screen when they take the radiation photographs. They're calling them something. They're going to call them something. And so we have tensor vibrational configurations that allow for systems coupling. Okay. And this takes place at the subatomic level. Subatomic level. You can't get any closer to the transdimensional interface than at the subatomic level. It just doesn't happen. Okay. So that's where we are. That's at that interface there. Yeah, a little bit different than the other, but they have to complement a little bit different than the other, but they have to complement each other. A little bit different than the other, but they have to complement each other, okay, in order for the joining to happen. So if they don't, this system's coupling goes all awry, chaos erupts, and this is a return to unused potential. And if you're going to return to chaos and unused potential, that means you can't meet your purpose in whatever that system's configuration is supposed to do. Now, having said that and having understood this, we now understand why there is no force in religion. Okay. Now, if there's no force in religion, and if matrimony is a central part of that religion, okay, no matter what you want to call it, then there's no force in marriage either, you see. Because what are you going to do? If you're going to force a marriage, then you're forcing something that chances are they're not going to allow the systems coupling to happen. And so people are going to be stuck in opposition, you see, and not apposition. So going back to our introductory level, that's where I'm trying to take this, brother. I hope I've made that clear. And I hope our listeners can stay with me, because this is very, very important. It is why not only do people who are forced into marriage unhappy. Why? It's not only that they're unhappy because they can't complete their purpose. This transfer of energy system to another energy system cannot be completed. It just doesn't work because their systems are not in harmony. It's kind of like a musical configuration with the overtones. being in a certain harmony. Now we know that musically, if you have a dissonance, that's okay. We welcome dissonance, but we don't want to stay there. Dissonance has to resolve into harmony, always, always. This is a law. It's a law. So if you have dissonance, it's kind of like a warning. It's telling you something's about to happen. It's a guide, but it's not the goal. The goal is the harmony. Okay, that's where we're going musically, and in this joining, whether it's in marriage or whether it's in partnership for business or community effort, this joining has to have this tensor vibrational configuration that allows for systems coupling at the subatomic level. Oh, am I getting spooky now? I don't think so. This is physics. That's what it is. These things can be measured now. You can measure the radiation from these coupling systems. They can be seen. They can now be seen. Just because nobody's talking about it, just because it's not in our particle physics books, doesn't mean it's not real. It is real. I'm here to tell you, to announce to the world of our Muslims who are seeking knowledge, that this is real. And I'm hoping that some of our will get excited about this because it excites me. If I were a young student again, I'd be, oh man, I'd be chomping at the bit to get my hands on this stuff and into a laboratory. Man, I'd be comparing this, that, and the next thing, and so and so and so and so. I'd be getting some. Oh, you can imagine what I'd be doing. Give me that CAT scan. Give me those. Oh, just give it to me. I know what to do with it. I know where to look. I know. I'll write the papers. I'm hoping someone will get into this. So let me just back up here, because if mismatched male and female, yin and yang, cannot do this systems coupling at the subatomic level, which governs everything in our physiology, okay? And if our physiology ain't right, the rest of us ain't right either, okay? Because we got to live in this physiology. We got to dwell in it. We got to sense with it. We got to act within it. Okay. So I can only think, well, that's going to make us unhealthy. And if we're forced into that. So we've got a couple of things here that we want to discuss. Marriage. All right. And we have, all right. And we have a holy thing called religion. And we have no force in religion. So if there's no force in religion, there cannot be any force in marriage, which is a big problem amongst many of our brothers and sisters. And if there could be no force there, because if they're forced and they cannot complete their purpose because of this hungry ghost. Oh, I didn't explain the hungry ghost, did I? Let me explain it. Let me explain the hungry ghost. You see, the hungry ghost is seeking this systems coupling. It has to have it. It is the essence of love. We have to have it. We are compelled to have it. God made us that way, to have this systems coupling. If we do not have the systems coupling, well, what can you do about it? Nothing. You have to learn to live with it, don't you? There are certain things in life that you have to accept. But if you're not forced to accept it by virtue of circumstance, then you have to seek the best, you see, and the best is to become systemed, coupled with the right partner, with the right spouse, okay? Okay, so let me just say this again. I'll remind you, this hungry ghost wants to eat what you have with serial philanderers and serial women who are changing partners all the time is they're trying to feed this hungry ghost. It has to be fed, you see. If they can't feed it, they cannot relax. And they cannot relax because Jordan Peterson makes it very, very clear. If you can't meet your purpose, you're going to be anxious all the time. You see, that, a man's got to enjoy his work. And if he doesn't enjoy the work, he's got to enjoy the proceeds of the work. All right. So maybe he's got a job that he doesn't like, but when he gets paid, he's able to fulfill his purpose to provide and to feed his family, to protect them. That will make him complete. All right. And so if you feed this hungry ghost, everything's all right. And you can fulfill your purpose. You can feel completed. If you can't feed this hungry ghost, you're going to keep on trying to feed it, you see. And that's what happens with the pedophiles. That's what happens with gay people. They can't feed this hungry ghost because those tensor vibrational configurations, they do not complement each other. Because the only tensor vibrational configurations that complement each other with respect to a sexual union are the male and the female. You can't change them. You can't modify this. It doesn't matter what you do to it because those tensor vibrational configurations at the subatomic level are not going to be satisfied. That hungry ghost is still going to be seeking its complement. It's going to be like an octopus going everywhere, trying to find its complement, you see. And if you're trying to find your complement with the wrong set of gendered people, you can't do it. You can't be fed. There are very famous gay people on record who said they slept with thousands of people. And they can't have a decent conversation unless they have a sexual union just before their television interview. There are certain very, very famous authors and people that of international standing who confess this. Okay, why? Why? This is why. They can't. The hungry ghost is always hungry. It's that Little Shop of Horrors. Do you remember that big plant?
Yeah.
Feed me,
Yeah.
feed me.
You've seen it. Yeah.
That's it. You see.
Mhm.
So this hungry ghost must be fed. So now, okay. Well, here's the blessing. You see, if you're with a partner whom God has revealed to you is indeed your partner. Mhm. You're not just loving the one you're with, you're loving the one that God has given you. You see, you're not loving the one that you were forced to marry. You're not loving the one that you chose in an unbalanced state of mind. You see, because we make those mistakes, and God hates divorce, but hey, He doesn't make it impossible, does He? Nobody's forcing you to stay with somebody you can't stand or who can't stand you or who can't help you to fulfill your purpose. That's the whole point here because when the hungry ghost is fed, fulfill our purpose. Now, my brother, I think I've made that clear. And if you read the book Sexology for the Wise, I make it even clearer there in a more scientific discussion. But now I want to hear from you, inshallah. What does Nunetics have to tell us about this hungry ghost?
Bilal ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inspire us to guide our hearts and guide our man ar-Rahim. Inspire us to guide our hearts and guide our tongues, to guide our hearts and guide our tongues to feel that which is right and to speak that which is truth and to be satisfied with his answers as those answers dawn upon our hearts and upon our intellects.
Mm.
We live in a world of opposing forces, and we also live in a world of apposition, of forces that are intent on coming together for the purpose of producing a third outcome. That's always the reason why complementary twos come together. It's with the intent of producing a third, which calls the cosmos, the universe. I like to call it the Yoniverse because I'm tracing their language back to its origin.
I see.
And because we live in a Yoniverse, it means that the entire universe has been put under a particular command by Allah. If we're to go to the Quran for an understanding of that command, Allah said to the universe when it was in a state of chaos, He said, "Come ye together." In modern lingo, we would say that Allah said, "Y'all better get together, like it or not."
Yes, yes.
And He said that the universe responded. So the universe is animate. The universe said, "We come willingly." So that's the key to the progress of any complementary twos or complementary pairs that come together. You have to have an intent to join, and that's the whole purpose of marriage. It's not forced. Not ikraha fi din. Let there be no compelling in the deen. You have to come together willingly.
Right.
Now, the idea of living in a yoniverse takes us to the meaning of the Sanskrit word yoni, Y-O-N-I. It's where the prefix uni comes from, U-N-I. And of course, uni leads to unity and also to union, which is also from the word yoni. Union is from yoni. And believe it or not, it also leads to the term yoga, because yoga means to join, to be united in a union. So if we're living in a universe or multiple universes, depending on where you come from and what you study in that area, then it means that we're living in a situation where multiple layers, multiple textures, multiple sounds, multiples are always attempting to multiply. We can't stay in existence unless we have a desire to multiply. So Allah put that sex instinct that you're speaking of in your book, He clocked it into our very DNA.
Yes.
And He put the incentive for coming together within our instinctive drives. We call them sex drives. Also, an aspect of that coming together, emotionality, how we feel about each other.
Yes.
And then we come together, and that's when we learn what to think about each other. We don't know what to think about each other. We have to first feel something for each other. It's the feeling that creates the magnetism that draws us together. And once we're together, then our five senses go to work to start to try to figure out who this person really is, outside of what they told me. Yeah, I'm going to ask their daddy. I'm going to ask their best friend. Yeah, I'm going to ask the clerk at the store that they go to every day. And that's how we get to know. Now, noetics is an interesting science in that it's speaking to a concept that I think can be better understood by Muslims. You mentioned Muslims understanding.
Yes.
It can be better understood by Muslims if we would follow the nunetics method of identifying words and sounds.
Yes.
The nunetics method allows us to look at the word noetic and trace it back to its origin, which is noe, N-O-E, and also the word, but they have specific importance for Muslims, understanding what the Quran is referring to by the name of the prophet Nuh. The Christian world would simply call him Noah.
Yes.
And Noah was responsible for the gathering of his people during a time when the world was experiencing a great flood. And the flood that we're speaking about now is not so much the physical flood in history, but we're speaking about the flood of consciousness. People have to be made more conscious of their life's activities in order to respond appropriately. And this happens for us all of the time when we become inundated by problems. Whenever we become inundated in the conscious sense by problems, we have problems all the time, but they're not always dawning in the conscience. Once we become conscious of it and it begins to knock on the door of the conscience, and we say, this is not right, we need to do something different, or we have an opportunity here that we're not taking advantage of, let's make a plan to get what we can get out of this situation. It's a good situation. Well, that's what floods do. Floods make you reassess where you are. It makes you reassess whether you want to stay where you are after all is said and done, right? As Florida. And it makes you aware of, well, let's start looking for better and higher ground, literally and figuratively.
Yes.
So we're still talking about union. Now, noetics is also focused on the idea of two thoughts. One is dealing with the intellect and its properties, but the other is dealing with the idea of intelligence. And I think noetics kind of muddies the water in terms of the distinction between the two. They present them as though they're the same thing, but my nunetic study has suggested that they are not the same thing. So you're talking about the subatomic level. That's what the intelligence is. But the intellect is not subatomic. The intellect is the zauj, the complementary partner, so to speak, that allows for the coupling of the intelligence with the intellect. The intelligence being the feminine principle that can be inseminated, and the intellect being the masculine principle that can do the inseminating. I'm going to explain it so that it's a bit more simple than that. If we're talking about the subatomic level, then as a human body now, we're talking about the genetic structure, and we're talking about those things that are going to have an effect on the baseline human. The baseline human is the instinctive human. Every person's instincts represents their baseline because the instincts are responsible for your wanting to survive. Food, warmth, water, all of those things that we need, light, rest, sleep. We need all of these things as a baseline before we can even talk about accruing anything else as an additional support for the life. So Maslow's theory speaks about it as that survival level on the bottom of their pyramid. And we're speaking about it now as the instinctive drive, of which the sex drive is part and parcel.
Yes.
All right. Now let's look at the word intelligence and just break it down. Any child can do this. It is a sentence actually that is saying internal, right? Intelligence, the internal telling or communicating from where? From the gents or the genes, right? So intelligence represents that quality of information that Allah has already bestowed upon us genetically. Your daddy didn't have to teach it to you. Your mama didn't have to sing it to you.
Right.
For you to remember it. It's already clocked into your DNA. They say reams of information are already power packed into the DNA, right? By the source creator. So we are born into this universe with native intelligence. And that should make every teacher wonderfully happy to know that they don't have the full responsibility of teaching your child what your child is supposed to know. The child already comes into the world with a possession given to it by its source creator, which allows for the teacher to then bestow upon that native intelligence that they're finding in that child, that goodness, that curiosity. All of those things are native. They're genetically clocked. And what we need to do is bring the masculine part of the equation and begin to grow an intellect. That's the masculine. The intellect develops, and by the way, that word means internal election. Elect. It's a noun as well as a verb. And as a verb, it means the internal choice making that the mind is doing all of the time.
Yes.
Based on 5 sense observation of the environment. What should I accept? What should I reject? What's good for me? What's not good for me? What decisions should I make? But Allah has clocked it into our instincts to want to choose the best. And Allah says in the Quran, and choose the best thereof. Even when reading the Quran, Allah doesn't say accept all of it. He says all of it is al-haq, but he doesn't. We don't have the capacity to go through the Quran and say yes, 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 yeah, okay, yeah, whether I understand it or not, yeah, I accept. No, Allah says, do they not deeply ponder the Quran? Allah wants you to think about it. Wait a minute, I might be seeing that incorrectly. I might have a misinterpretation of that. I might have somebody's interpolation of that. So
yes,
Allah says, and choose the best thereof, and choose as much as is comfortable for you.
yes,
As much as is comfortable for you. He never said to read a 30th a day during Ramadan. That's not Allah.
no.
All right.
Yeah,
So let's get this
I'm
coupling.
so happy to hear you say
Oh man,
that.
yes, indeed. Let's get this couple.
Yes,
Let's go back to the idea of the coupling, the joining, the yoni verse that
yes,
we
yes,
did.
yes.
So the natural complementary pair that we're dealing with now is the intelligence, which is already clocked into your gens or your genes, and the intellect, the internal election that is being made because of this wonderful crown that Allah created as a neocortex in the brain.
Yes.
That thinking brain, that brain that is able to tap into moral questions and give rational application when it finds the solutions. Here's how we implement this. That's what this neo, see, neo is the same as saying noe in noetics. It's the same thing. Neo means new.
Yes, yes.
Noah brought in a new world after the flood. It's
Yes.
all conceptually related. All right. So once we understand that we've been gifted with these two basic properties called intelligence and intellect, then we have to decide what the stratified responsibilities are for both of these properties that Allah has given us. And I would ask our listeners, if you're not understanding what any of us are saying, to when you get the playback, just stop it. Learn to stop the tape. You know, once you get the recording, you can stop it and rewind it.
Of course. Yes.
And don't think of it as being too much of a challenge because we're using a word or a concept or something in history that happened. If you have access to the replay, just stop it and go study. These are not entertainment videos. These are inner attainment videos. The purpose is for inner attainment, not entertainment.
Yes.
Don't want anything entering us that we don't know about.
Correct.
All right. Now, gents, if we want the intellect to perform correctly, if we want the intellect to perform correctly. In other words, it's like saying we have to have the ultimate respect for the woman if we want the man to act right.
That's correct.
So Allah says what? Have taqwa for arham. Have taqwa, caution, prudence in regards to the wombs that bore you. And all wombs are feminine. And all wombs are the product of mammalian life, not reptilian life.
Correct.
So when Allah says reverence the wombs that bore you, he's talking about those systems that gave birth to your multi-layered life, your instinctive life, your emotional life, your the life of your intellect, the life of your psychic self, the life of your pineal, your third eye. All of those have their respective levels where they require further development. They are all wombs in and of themselves that need to be inseminated. They need to be respected. They need to be built upon, and they need to be protected. You need to protect yourself against people inseminating you emotionally. We're still talking sexology now.
Yes, yes.
We need to protect ourselves from people just putting their influences into your mind to make you stray away from your goals and fulfill their goals. So all of these properties carry both masculine and feminine principles, but principally the emotions are where the feminine principles are, and the intellect is where the masculine principles are. Right? So we're talking about the union of these things, the joining together of these things, keeping the human system holistic. You mentioned the word holy earlier. And in the same breath, practically, you mentioned the word sacred. And these are another of those words that become jumbled and mixed up, and people begin to think that it's talking about the same thing, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So the Christians call their book the Holy Bible.
Mm-hmm.
I call our book the Sacred Quran.
Mm-hmm.
I don't call the Quran holy, and I'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
why. First of all, it's a trick word. It makes the people on high who understand that language as satire, they say
Mm-hmm.
it is full of holes, isn't it? This whole holistic,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was
Yes,
supposed to
yes.
mean. Holistic,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was
Yes,
supposed to
yes.
mean.
That's
But
what
when
it's
they
supposed
started
to mean, yeah.
tampering with it during the Nicene conferences and developing all kinds of
Mm-hmm. Of
creeds,
course. Yes.
same thing with the Muslims when they began to fabricate hadiths and say this is equal to the Quran or this is necessary along with the Quran, or you won't
Mm-hmm.
understand the Quran if you don't have this
Yes. Mm-hmm.
from Bukhari and Muslim, and think that you cannot understand the Quran, which the Quran itself says that it is complete. Stand the Quran, which the Quran itself says that it is complete in and of itself and fully detailed.
Yes.
So the Quran is not holy. You can't punch holes in it.
Mm-hmm.
You can punch holes into things that they give as supporting evidence of it,
Mm-hmm.
but you
Mm-hmm.
can't punch holes in the Quran because the Quran is not holy. It's sacred. Now, let's talk about where that word came from.
Okay.
That word comes out of the Hebrew language. And as you know, I was
Mm-hmm.
born into the Jewish religion before I became
Mm-hmm.
Muslim at 13 years
Mm-hmm.
old. The word sacred comes from the Hebrew word sakr,
Mm-hmm.
S-A-C-R, sakr. And sakr is the Hebrew equivalent of the Arabic word dhakr.
Mm-hmm.
And dhakr, notice it sounds like dhikr,
Yes.
just a change of a vowel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dhakr is the literal word used for the male gender.
Mm-hmm.
The male is dhakr
Mm-hmm.
and the female is untha. The
Mm-hmm.
male is an electric principle, dhakr,
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes.
and the female is magnetic. The female is magnetic. Un, you hear that magnetism? Un in the N sound. Un,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
un. She's magnetic. So
Mm-hmm.
we're dealing with now the complementary pair called electromagnetism
Yes.
that has to come together in order for the creation to be further sustained, right?
Of course.
You can't have one without the other, but of the two, magnetism is the greater force. Those two,
Mm-hmm.
magnetism, so says science, is the greater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Magnetism, so says science, is the greater
Mm-hmm.
force. But the Quran beat them to the punch because the Quran says, and the dhakr is in no wise like the untha.
Mm-hmm.
They say, and the
Yes.
male is in no wise like the female. But it
Yes.
doesn't do that to give the male a superior position. It gives that to
Yes.
let the male know, hey, you're disrespecting the feminine principle. But if it weren't for the feminine principle that guides and guards over reproduction, where would you be with all your masculinity?
Yes, yes. I could let me interject here
Please do.
because this electromagnetic force, I left that out of my introduction. Not that I didn't, it's not that I didn't think it was important, but you know, it's called EMF for short, electromagnetic force. And this is very, very important in the analysis of this systems coupling because the system coupling allows for this electromagnetic force to prosper and to fulfill its purpose. So, this electromagnetic force is what we sense before we actually intellect it. Okay,
Yes.
we sense this. And it's so strong, it's so powerful that secret services teach it as part of their situational awareness programs. You see, they can sense somebody watching them up to 50, 60 feet
Yes.
away,
You got it.
something of that nature. This is
Mhm.
proven scientific fact. We can do that. So this electromagnetic force, these EMFs, they are very powerful and they're very significant with respect to this idea of joining the uns with the zakar, if you will. Okay, so I am sorry to interrupt. I
No,
just
that's
wanted to
fine.
bring that up
All I
because
wanted you to, yeah,
this is
put that in.
this is part of the digestion that takes place when we start to eat a meal like this.
That's
You
right.
see, yeah. So we have to eat it. We have to chew on it, and we have
Season
to digest it. You
it.
see,
That's
this
right.
sort of thing. So I think that's very, very important. And the EMFs are talked about by the physicists who study this thing called noetic science, whether they're looking at the crystallization of frozen water under certain influences, whether it's
That's
water
evocative
that's,
work. Yeah,
yeah,
you did wonderful.
all the homeopathic phenomena. All of this is part of that. These electromagnetic forces are real. I have experienced them. I have used them in healing processes, and I can tell you they're very real. And there are now people who are developing therapeutic applications using the electromagnetic forces that are available to us at certain
Bravo.
frequencies to
Bravo.
complement. Yeah, this is taking place now. It's a reality, dear people. We're not talking nonsense. This is reality, and it needs to be systematically organized in a way that can be presented to our new generation of students so they can better understand who they are and better get a better grasp on their identity, you see, because this identity has a purpose, and this purpose is the joining. The joining comes, and then the purpose is fulfilled. Probably philosophize on that, but let me hand the floor back to you, dear brother, and go on with this
Yes.
EMF idea.
Concentrate on the consonantal sounds of words.
Mm-hmm.
Forget about the language. Doesn't matter the
Mm-hmm.
language. This is
Yes.
the beauty of Nunetics. It's not like Grimm's Law. Grimm's Law has limited itself to Indo-European languages.
Yes.
Nunetics covers the board of any sounds that can come out of a human mouth anywhere on planet Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key.
Yes.
Universal or yoni.
It is universal. Yeah.
So when you listen to the word join or hear it, Join, join,
Mm-hmm.
you can hear the consonantal connections between the word join and the word gene, Gene,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
because your genes are also joining two things. We call them DNA and
Mm-hmm.
mitochondrial RNA.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You need those two working together as a united pair in order to continue the
Mm-hmm.
replication of those properties, correct?
That's correct. And our medical authorities are messing with them right now, aren't they?
Yes, indeed, which is the reason I'm bringing that up. So when Allah says you
Mm-hmm.
have taqwa for the arham, these people
Mm-hmm.
who are messing with mama RNA,
Yeah.
they're not
Yes, they
having
are.
taqwa for the for the wombs that bore them,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
because you have to come through the portal of the RNA to continue replicating.
Mm-hmm.
You come through the DNA, but the RNA is what keeps you here.
Mm-hmm.
See?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, gene, join, and in the Quran, we have the concept of jinn. We're not going to get into that today, though.
Mm-hmm.
But the jinn is also responsible for your human life replicating.
Mm-hmm.
That's the challenge that's necessary, just like the gene is necessary for replication. You also have an issue where the DNA and the RNA exists within an environment which allows for its protection. It exists within the core of the cell, which is, as you know, doctor, surrounded by a cell membrane. The cell membrane, are you still hearing me okay? Because it's telling me I have an unstable connection.
I missed that last statement
Yeah,
with
because
respect to
you
the
started
RNA.
breaking up. Yeah, you started breaking up a little. So what I was saying was that the genes exist within the core of the cell, and the cell is surrounded by a coating that we call the membrane. And the membrane
Yes.
serves to protect the integrity of the genetic material, the DNA, etc., that is within the cell. That's what the membrane
Yes.
is doing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when antagonistic influences come towards the cell, Allah created the cell's membrane to be able to close in on itself so as to not let in
Mm-hmm.
any antagonistic forces.
Yes, of
And
course.
it will remain that way until the intelligence that Allah clocked into the membrane decides that there's no longer danger at bay, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
the membrane and the cell will open back up and accept the nutrition and everything else from the blood and all of that. And if it finds that there's some more antagonism or some more threats coming from the environment, then it'll shut down again. That's what we have lost. That's a part of our
Mm-hmm. Yes.
native human, that electromagnetic frequency that we're feeling even before the danger gets here, magnetic frequency that we're feeling even before the danger gets here. And we don't
Yes.
respond correctly anymore because they've caused it to become disharmony. There's disharmony now, right?
Well, yeah, the
Yeah.
dissonance is constant,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it interferes with our reception.
Right. And there was a major thing now related to cognitive dissonance, right?
Yes,
We
of
see what
course.
we don't want to see. We know
Mm,
it's there, but we don't want to deal with it, right?
yeah,
So we're creating a
uh,
dissonance on our own that can be readily resolved if we would just give thought to what this
mm-hmm,
life entails and what
mm-hmm,
Allah or whatever you see as your source creator is asking you to do to preserve that life. Now, I'm
mm-hmm.
going to end by saying that the success of this human life is in recognizing this Zhaojing principle. Zhao is simply the word for complementary pair. It's called the Zawj,
Yes, yes.
Z-A-W-J.
Mm-hmm,
What in English came to be called the zygote in medical
mm-hmm,
language, or whichever way it's
yes.
pronounced, Z-Y-G-O-T-E, comes from Zawj. Okay.
Mm-hmm,
It's the splitting into complementary pairs, not into antagonistic pairs, not into enemy forces, male against female, female against male, which is what they're trying to get
mm-hmm,
us to rev up and become excited
yes,
now, is that we can't live with the male. So the male now needs another male instead of a female because we can't live with the female, and the female needs another female because, I don't want to go through all of that BS that I have to go through in having a man around me. So I'll have somebody
yes.
who's like me. That makes sense to me. I'll
Mm-hmm,
have somebody who's like me. She's a woman, I'm a woman,
mm-hmm,
man. Well, he's a man, I'm a man. I don't have to deal with female emotions. But you come with a package of female emotions.
yes,
It's your female emotions that are making you feel that way.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So we have to go back to the drawing board called the fitrah and begin to
Mm-hmm,
map out the essence of this human life all over again by rediscovering how Allah has done these things successfully in the cosmos, in the fitrah, in nature. How are these things successful at replicating and keeping the life firm and in
mm-hmm,
order? How does that happen in nature? And then I have to be sincere enough to accept nature's discourse on that subject.
mm-hmm,
Nature says that on the most part, you need masculine principle and feminine principle to come together so
mm-hmm.
that we can continue this thing called life.
Yes,
So if that's true, even if I have inklings or feelings inside that make me feel more feminine than masculine or whatever the logic they're trying to use is,
mm-hmm,
the fitrah has to support it. And if the fitrah doesn't support it, then your innocence should say, I'm going with the fitrah. I'm going with
mm-hmm.
my source creator and his plan. Because
Yes,
I don't have the bandwidth to make that kind of judgment on myself
yes.
that I should be homosexual, that I should
Mm-hmm,
be lesbian. I don't have that bandwidth because I don't find this lesbianism and this lesbianism and homosexuality. I don't find it in the tree. I don't find it in the clouds. I don't find it in relationship between skies and earth. That's masculine, feminine also.
yes.
I don't find that.
It's
I
not there.
find that they work best when they have respect for their respective positions. And
Mm-hmm,
those positions have been given to them not by a scholar, not by the ulama, not by the church leadership, the Catholic leadership, or whoever
mm-hmm.
else might be in support of that lifestyle. They didn't create all of this that is around us. the source creator created it. So I have to go to
Mm-hmm.
the creation itself and study the science of that set of objects.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm a Muslim, I have to go to the Quran, because the Quran is merely the cheat sheet, if you will, for understanding
Yes.
the creation.
Yes.
Yeah, Allah just saving you a lot of time.
Yes.
He's
Yes.
putting in the Quran what you need to go study in nature.
Yes.
The Quran is full of nature. And
Mm-hmm.
Allah is saying, okay, to bypass this, go study the pomegranate. Don't worry so much about the regular apple. Yeah, there's no regular
Yeah.
apple in the Quran. Allah doesn't talk about lemons in the Quran. Yeah, they're good, but the fruits and the vegetables that Allah put into the Quran are most significant for you understanding your human development.
Yes. Dr. Hani goes into that. He goes further to define these fruits
Yeah,
in
why no
terms of
pineapple in the Quran, right?
adab.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Let us then close here, dear brother. I think we've let's then close here, dear brother. I think we haven't exhausted the subject. We've
Indeed.
opened up. Well, we've examined a certain set of worms that out of this can that we opened up in the beginning. So um, this coming together is much more than just a wedding cake now, isn't it? With icing on top and a little handsome couple, beautiful,
Yeah.
handsome fellow and beautiful bride sitting up there. All of that's plastic compared to what we're discussing here. We're discussing the real thing, the real elements, the sub elements, the metaphysics of what stands behind the physics, you see. And these tense or vibrational configurations are real. The systems coupling that occurs at that base, at that basis, sub basis, if you will, is real. It's not an imaginary
Not at all.
idea. It's not a theory.
That's right.
These are real. These are realities, and the electromagnetic fields that emanate from the dissonant or consonant joinings, they're also reals. So one is productive, the other one may be productive after you learn from the error, you see, and then resolve it to its consonant resolution, and then proceed with those harmonics so that you can complete what it is that your source creator, our source creator, has given us what to do, has commanded us to do. Go forth and be fruitful, multiply, 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 multiply in this multiplex, this multiple universe, all these terms, the zakan, we get from the Jewish wise fellow, you
Yeah.
see, the old man who's wise, he's called the zakan. And all of these words are related. The the uns, yeah. Oh, I love these concepts.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you for,
let me end. Let me just end
yes,
by
go on.
saying that we're to look for the ultimate joining in what the
Yes,
Quran calls Jannah. See,
yes, the
and
ultimate joining, yes.
yeah, and that
Jannah.
Jannah begins in this life.
Yes,
And if
I
it is
agree with you.
successful in this life, then Allah will
Mhm.
allow the goodness of the Jannah here to join again in the Jannah
Mhm.
after this physical life is dissipated.
I wholeheartedly believe that.
Yes.
And should I sacredly believe that.
Yes.
I'm going to be careful using that word now, Holy. Anyway, thank you very much, dear
Alhamdulillah. It's always my
instructor.
pleasure.
Yes.
Our pleasure
Um,
to be in each other's company.
yes, it is. It is a great pleasure. So thank you so much for another weekend, another week meeting. And inshallah, we shall meet again next week and carry forth this conversation um, and see where it is that Allah is leading us individually and collectively in this we enterprise that He's brought it to our attention.
I have a 3-day weekend in Atlanta coming
Yes.
up. So it'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And Monday will actually be a travel day. So I'll get back to you to let you know for sure because we
Okay,
Tuesday
don't
to
worry. If you
time
can't
or
make it on Monday,
yeah.
it's all right. If we skip a
Well, I'm
week,
saying
that's
this for our
okay.
listeners who look forward to these videos being.
Oh, okay.
Some people
Yes, yes,
crave
yes.
this information.
Yes, I hope that they're enjoying this. I
Oh,
haven't
they
been
are
able.
immensely. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So I want to thank them for listening in, and thank Allah for allowing us to have these conversations for our benefit and the benefit of our listeners. So with that being said, dear brother, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah for being in my life. We love you.
You're welcome. And
Okay.
likewise.
Life. We love you.
You're welcome. And
Okay.
likewise. Ditto, ditto, ditto.
Yes.
Is that word permitted? Yeah.
That's permitted. Yeah.
Okay, okay.
It just represents the increase in data.
There we go.